Hello out there. It's been a little while since I've done a real estate reality with Jason educational video. I've been doing a lot of home videos, which can be educational on their stuff so that you know what kind of homes is available, at least in our area of Tennessee. But I want to try to get back to what the main focus of this YouTube channel actually is. And that's to teach people and to help you guys be a little better prepared, I guess, for whenever it's time to make that real estate move for you. Whether it's been years since you've done it or you're a first time home buyer, maybe you even bought a property 2 years ago, but some things have changed, or you didn't have an agent that really educated you in the process like they should have. So today, what I'm wanting to talk about is agency. So, first of all, in Tennessee, which is one of very few states that still allows dual agency, it is actually still legal here. And what that means is I could have a property on 123 Main Street and be the listing agent of that property. Someone called me and say, "Hey, I want to see your listing on 123 Main Street." Okay, I set the appointment. I go out there, I'm representing the seller, so I don't even have to ask you to sign a buyer's representation agreement, which is something that is scary to people now because you have to have one of those signed in order to enter a home. But a listing agent, you don't have to necessarily do that. You might be thinking, "Oh wow, that's great, I ought to do that all the time." It's actually not a great thing. We'll get to that here in just a second. But I set the appointment to show you my listing on 123 Main Street. We get there, you fall in absolute love with the house. You can actually go ahead and make that offer through me, even though I am representing the seller. And at that point, what happens is I facilitate the transaction for you and the seller. I no longer, if I'm doing this legally, I no longer am fully representing seller or you as the buyer. I become a facilitator in the process to help the transaction close. I still get my commission. I get the full commission because I also brought the buyer. Now, on that, what that means is for one, you as the buyer have no representation whatsoever during the process. So whenever this comes about that you want to make an offer on the property and I'm the listing agent and you're making an offer on my listing, I cannot advise you on what to offer, any special terms that you might need. I cannot help you as far as suggesting any repairs that might come up after you have a home inspection done. All I simply can do is write up the documents for you. And if I'm doing it legally, as far as my seller, and the reason why I keep using that term legally is because if I already have a relationship with my seller, I might be inclined to still help them even though I'm not supposed to. Okay, so that's something you need to know too. I'm not going to be helpful to you as the buyer because it's a lot easier for me to follow the law. But with my seller, I might throw a few little helpful suggestions here or there, not even meaning to do so, because I've already built a relationship with them. But that's a whole nother video all in itself. So going through this unrepresented is totally not in your best interest. So you don't sign a buyer's representation agreement with me because I'm the listing agent and I don't need one because I'm working for the seller. Well, all of the people out there that's a little bit scared of this buyer's representation agreement, let me tell you a little bit about that. So what this is, for one, this is not new. In August of last year, the rule through NAR, the National Association of Realtors, was made and passed that in order to show a residential property to a buyer a buyer's representation agreement had to be signed prior to entering that dwelling. Now, buyer's representation agreements has been around for a long time, but before this ruling happened, in all honesty, which we shouldn't have been doing to begin with, and I say we because I was also one of those agents, sometimes you would never even see that buyer's representation agreement until you were making an offer on a property. And at that point, we knew that we had to get that signed in order to lawfully help you through the offer process and the follow-up of the transaction to the closing table. So these are not new, it's the timing that's new. Because now we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, what we should have been doing the whole time, which is allowing the buyer to know exactly what's going on before entering a property and possibly falling in love with that property. So what that translates into, the buyer's representation agreement is between you, the buyer, and the brokerage. So even though I will be your buyer's agent potentially, you're actually agreeing to work with the brokerage. So if something happens that I leave, or my broker gets tired of my smart mouth or something like that and kicks me out to the curb, you're still represented because the agreement is with the broker. So it doesn't matter if I fall out of the picture or not. It also states the terms of the commission. So whatever I am offering as commission is in that agreement. So you know right off the bat what my expectation to work with you is, and we can negotiate it if we need to, but it's in writing. So once it's negotiated and we're in agreement of what I'm going to make and what I'm going to be working for you with, it is an agreement and it cannot be changed without your authority to do so. And now the commission is the part where it gets a lot of people scared on using a buyer's agent. You will not believe how many times I hear, I do not want to use a buyer's agent. And the sole reason for not using a buyer's agent is because you think you're going to get off cheaper. Okay? So at least here in our area, 98% of sellers are still offering to pay a buyer's agent commission. Again, that is nothing new. The only thing different is before August of last year, the commission split was in the MLS. So we were easily able to tell you, and in some cases as the buyer, depending on what MLS system it was in, you saw what was being offered to the buyer's agent right off the bat. It was very easy and simple for you to know what was being paid for, to know if your buyer's agent was going to be fully taken care of in the transaction, or if a little bit would have to be put on top. So this is not new that sellers are offering to pay or not offering to pay buyer's agents, because this question has been asked way before last year ever happened. Okay, 98% of sellers are still offering to pay buyer's agents commission. Probably the majority of the time, it is paying the majority of the commission, and maybe 0.5 to 1% is still needed from the buyer standpoint, which is still a huge savings. There are those few sellers that do not want to pay a buyer's agent. They only pay their agent. In that case, does that mean that you can't put an offer in on that house because you're already paying so much and you really don't have it to pay extra for a buyer's agent? No, that means that you negotiate that just like you would the price or any of the other terms. But in most cases though, the seller is paying for your buyer's agent. So the whole reason of not using a buyer agent is totally misunderstood, because most people do not pay their agents. The sellers do. So before you start looking, find yourself a buyer's agent to help represent you through the process and make sure that you're taken care of. If you're worried about cost, talk to that agent about it so that they know going in that you need assistance from the seller, whether it's being offered or whether it has to be negotiated if they want to sell their home. You are not getting off any cheaper by not using a buyer's agent. So you might be thinking, okay, so what happens to that money if I don't use a buyer's agent? Great question. So when the listing appointment happens on the listing side of this 123 Main Street that I was talking about, it is decided then if the seller is going to pay a buyer's agent compensation or not. Okay, so let's say, just using whole numbers here, let's say that the listing agent says, okay, well, our office asked on the listing to list properties with a 10% commission. Now this is very high. I'm just going to put that in there, okay? But this is just for good round out numbers, okay? So we offer to list properties at 10%. 5% will go to my fee. Another 5% will go toward a buyer's agent that's going to bring you a buyer in. Now the seller may be like, well, why do I need to pay a buyer's agent? Great question. So the reason why it's good to offer a buyer's agent's compensation is, for one, buyers, this is going to be followed up in a different video so you can see the breakdown of what the costs are. Buyers are paying a lot more at the closing table than just the purchase price. And it greatly exceeds what the seller is paying at the closing table. So this helps make your property look a little bit more attractive to a buyer if you're offering buyer agent compensation, because that means less money for them out of pocket. Well, the seller may still say, I don't really want to do that. So why don't we list my home at 5%? That's half. That's your half. And the buyers will need to come up with that on their own. Okay, we can do that. All right. But in most cases, what's going to happen is that seller is going to say, that makes really great sense, and I want my house to be as attractive as possible because I want it to sell. So yeah, let's go ahead and list it at 10%. Okay, great. So then that's all in writing, just like with a buyer representation agreement. Sorry, I think I had a stroke there for a minute. So the listing agreement is just like that buyer's representation agreement. Once it's down, it can't be changed without the listing agent and the seller agreeing to do an amendment to that contract. So from that point on, the commission that's owed for when this house closes is 10%. Now, it's supposed to be that part of that goes to a buyer's agent, okay? Now, you come to the listing agent because you don't want to pay a buyer's agent and you don't want to sign a buyer's representation agreement, and you think you're going to get off a lot cheaper. Okay, so you come to me as the listing agent for 123 Main Street. You love the house and you put in an offer. Offer gets accepted. You get to the closing table. Well, guess what? You might be thinking, man, I got off without having to pay any commission. Not really, because for one, the commission was already worked into the seller's price. Okay, so when you're seeing that seller's price, that is to cover everything as far as commission and what they need to either pay the bank or to make money on that house, regardless of what standing that's in. So you have paid the commission when you give them their money, whether you're financing or you've got cash. Then what happens is it was agreed to pay 10%, 5% to the listing agent, 5% to whoever brings the buyer. Well, guess what? The listing agent just facilitated your buying of that property on 123 Main Street. So you know what happens? They get the whole 10%. You didn't save anything, and you went through this transaction without anybody being in your corner. So, whether you use a buyer's agent or not after this video, that's completely up to you. But my whole purpose of doing these videos on Real Estate Reality with Jason on YouTube is try to educate. So at least now, you know the reality, and you can make that choice on your own.